My name is Clarissa Morgan, 52 years old. For 2 decades, I was the backbone of Oakbridge Living's tech operations, quietly building, maintaining, and evolving the systems that kept their residential management empire humming along. From tenant applications to maintenance requests, rent processing to security protocols, I had built it all. And because everything ran so smoothly, they forgot I existed. That changed on a gray Monday morning. "Clarissa, can you step into the conference room?" asked Diane from HR, her voice carefully neutral. Inside, Maxwell Dean, the newly hired chief technology officer, fresh out of some flashy fintech company in San Francisco, sat with his arms crossed and a calculated smile on his face. He looked like he rehearsed what he was about to say. "We can hire 3 junior engineers for your salary," he said flatly. "It's nothing personal, just numbers, just cost optimization. Cost optimization." That was their term for cutting out the person who had architected their entire digital infrastructure from the ground up. I glanced at Diane. She pushed a sleek folder across the table. 2 months of severance, she said softly. "Plus your accrued vacation time." I opened the folder, then closed it. "Thank you," I said, standing up. Maxwell blinked, clearly expecting a fight. "That's it?" he asked. "No questions? No concerns?" I looked him square in the eye. "Seems pretty straightforward." He exchanged a confused look with Diane. But I was done. I wasn't angry. I was done. There's a difference. I packed up my office in under an hour. 20 years, reduced to a cardboard box. My old mug, some printed architecture diagrams, a photo of me and my daughter during a server upgrade weekend. I nodded goodbye to a few colleagues, some too uncomfortable to even make eye contact, and took the elevator down for the last time. In the underground parking garage, I sat in my car for a few minutes, just breathing. No tears, no panic. I knew something they didn't. They had just fired the only person who truly understood how their systems worked. At home, I sat on the back porch overlooking the garden, sipping on black coffee. My daughter Lily called, sensing something was off. "They let me go," I said simply. "What? Are they insane?" "They think I cost too much," I replied with a faint laugh. There was silence on the other end. Then, "Well, maybe now they'll learn what cheap really costs." I didn't respond, but deep down, I knew they would. It didn't take long. 3 weeks after I walked out of Oakbridge living with a cardboard box and my dignity intact, the cracks began to show. It started with a small glitch in the tenant portal, users unable to reset their passwords. Then maintenance requests began duplicating themselves, leading to overbooked crews and a lot of angry calls. By week 4, the rent processing system failed mid-cycle, auto withdrawals stalled, and late fees triggered en masse. Tenants were furious. Property managers were scrambling. And Oakbridge? Oakbridge was panicking. The first call came from Diane, of all people. Her voice was tight, too cheerful. "Hi, Clarissa, I hope you're doing well. We were wondering if you'd be open to a quick consulting arrangement. Just temporary. To help stabilize some of the systems." I stared at my coffee mug for a second before answering. "What's the rate?" $300 an hour, minimum 4-hour block. "Not interested," I said, and hung up. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I just remembered every board meeting where I asked for a documentation team, and every time they told me, "Too expensive, we'll revisit next quarter." That quarter never came. And now, they were living in the result of that decision. 2 days later, another call. This time, it was Maxwell himself. His voice had lost the smugness. "We're willing to go up to 500 per hour, he said. "Just a few days of your time, Clarissa. That's all we're asking." I didn't say no immediately. I let the silence hang in the air like a slow exhale, Then I replied, "You said I was too expensive to keep. I haven't gotten any cheaper." Click. I went back to pruning my hydrangeas. By the end of the week, I heard from Aaron, a systems analyst I'd mentored years ago. His text read, "Clarissa, they're imploding. Backup systems aren't syncing. Data conflicts everywhere. Maxwell's losing his mind." I didn't respond. What they never understood was this. The system I built wasn't just a patchwork of scripts and databases. It was a living ecosystem. Every module had dependencies. Every shortcut they took, it had a delayed cost. And without documentation, without context, the new hires were effectively trying to fly a plane by poking random buttons and hoping for lift. I'd tried to warn them, over and over. But I was just the tech lead, right? Now they were learning the hard way. Meanwhile, I sat on my back porch, laptop open, brushing up my resume and sipping homemade iced tea. My inbox had a few pings from recruiters already. Apparently, word gets around when a company's entire infrastructure buckles less than a month after losing one employee. As I watched the sun dip behind the treetops, I felt something unfamiliar. Not revenge, not satisfaction, just peace. Because, for once, they were finally seeing my absence for what it truly was, the most valuable thing I'd ever given them. The email came late on a Thursday night, buried between spam and newsletter junk. The subject line was simple: opportunity to build from scratch. It was from Rivertide Estates, a regional property management group I'd crossed paths with during conferences and trade panels over the years. They weren't flashy, just solid, dependable, and growing faster than anyone expected. The message was short, signed by their Director of Operations, Elena Shaw. "Clarissa, we've followed your work at Oak Bridge for years. We heard what happened, and frankly, we think their loss could be our gain. We're about to overhaul everything, from tenant platforms to maintenance systems, and we don't want off-the-shelf junk. We want something that actually works. Would you be open to a conversation?" I read it 3 times before replying. "Let's talk." We met the next day at a quiet coffee shop downtown, far from the manicured chaos of corporate campuses. Elena showed up in jeans and a Rivertide fleece. No pretense. We didn't talk about titles or compensation first. We talked systems, architecture, integration, scalability, transparency. And for the first time in years, I felt like someone actually listened when I spoke. When she finally slid a printed offer across the table, I raised an eyebrow. "Chief Systems Architect," she said. "Full autonomy. You set the standards, the documentation structure, the workflows. You'll have a real budget for training and redundancy. Salaries 20% above what Oak Bridge paid you. Stock options if we hit our growth milestones." I didn't say yes right away. I asked questions. I looked her in the eye and told her I'd walk the second someone tried to cut corners or pull rank on the technical team. She didn't flinch. She just nodded. "We're done patching old messes. We're building something that lasts." That night, I signed the offer. The following Monday, I stepped into Rivertide's modest HQ with a laptop and a blank whiteboard. No tangled legacy code. No outdated frameworks duct taped to each other. Just possibility. And this time, everything would be different. Every single decision was documented. Every subsystem had ownership protocols. Every engineer, even the interns, would go through training modules I built myself. I instituted mandatory code reviews, disaster simulations, real-time logging, and, most importantly, a culture of shared knowledge. No more lone wolves holding secrets. No more, "Only I know how this works." I wasn't going to make myself indispensable again. I was going to make the system indispensable, independent of any one person, even me. My second week in, Elena walked by my office and paused at the door. "Looks like you're having fun." I glanced at the half-built architecture. Diagram glowing on my screen? You know what? I actually am. It started with a LinkedIn message from Travis, one of the network engineers I used to mentor. Quiet guy, loyal to a fault. I hadn't heard from him since the day I walked out with that box in my arms. Clarissa, off the record. Westmark. Group just pulled out. Full portfolio. Gone. I thought you'd want to know. I read it twice. Westmark Group, Oakbridge's biggest client. They'd contracted Oakbridge to manage over 9,000 residential units across 5 states. Losing them wasn't a paper cut. It was a hemorrhage. 2 hours later, I got another message. This one from Aaron, who hadn't reached out since his last cryptic, "They're imploding" text. They've lost access to all historical tenant records. 3 years. Gone. No backups are working. Westmark's legal team is threatening litigation. I set my coffee down slowly. 3 years of records gone? That couldn't just be a mistake. That was system-deep, architecture-level failure. Backup. Chains broken. Restoration protocols skipped. Data integrity safeguards disabled. Or worse, misunderstood. I knew that setup inside and out. I also knew they'd been trying to overhaul it without understanding a damn thing about how it actually functioned. I opened my laptop, curious, not tempted, and pulled up the public side of Oakbridge's tenant portal. Error 503. Server down. I refreshed. Same result. I checked a maintenance subdomain I'd once managed. 404. Everything was down. By noon, tech news forums were lighting up with anonymous tips about a catastrophic IT collapse at a major East Coast property group. I didn't have to guess who. Later that evening, Aaron called. I found something you should see, he said. I met him at a diner 2 towns over, one of those off-the-highway places that smelled like old coffee and hash browns. He brought a laptop. I pulled archived internal emails before I left, he said, sliding it over. The screen was filled with correspondence between Maxwell Dean and the Oakbridge board. Clean, cold corporate language, strategic cost restructuring, reducing reliance on legacy personnel. A line in one email made my stomach twist. Morgan's systems are outdated, over-engineered. Replacing her will simplify operations and increase valuation ahead of Q4. There it was, clear as daylight. My exit wasn't a budget cut. It was premeditated, calculated to bump the company's sale price on paper by trimming what they saw as fat. Only, I wasn't fat. I was the spine, and now they had no skeleton left to hold the damn thing up. Aaron leaned in, dropping his voice. They're trying to sell. Private equity's been circling for months. Maxwell was supposed to make the company leaner before. The deal? He sat back, exhaling. Instead, he nuked it. I left that diner feeling no urge to celebrate. I didn't smile. I didn't toast. But I did feel the kind of quiet, rooted satisfaction you only get when truth stops whispering and starts shouting. They thought I was expensive. Now they were learning what cheap really costs. The first call came from an unfamiliar number, one of those generic corporate lines that usually go straight to voicemail. This time I picked up. Clarissa, hi. This is Maxwell Dean. His voice was different now, less confident, more hollow, like he hadn't slept in days. I wanted to apologize for how things ended, and, more importantly, we'd like to explore bringing you back as a senior consultant, or potentially CTO. There it was. The Hail Mary. I didn't speak right away. I just listened to the desperation bleeding through the silence between his words. We're prepared to offer you a full package, he continued. Your previous salary, plus a signing bonus, flexible hours, whatever it takes to stabilize. The system. The board is unanimous. I could picture them. Those same faces who once nodded politely as he laid out his plan to phase me out, now blinking in boardroom panic as their empire crumbled around them. I exhaled slowly. Maxwell, I said, my tone even. It's not about the money. He paused. Then, what is it about? I didn't hesitate. It's about respect. A long silence followed. You think I'm enjoying this, I added. Watching you spiral. Watching the system I built collapse in your hands. He didn't deny it. But I'm not, I continued. Because this didn't have to happen. I warned you. I documented the risks. I asked for the resources. And instead of listening, you replaced me with fresh resumes and PowerPoints. Clarissa, please. I'm not coming back, I said firmly. I've already committed. To Rivertide, I'm building something new. Something that won't fall apart the moment a cost report needs trimming. I could hear him swallow. You really won't even consult? 1 week, 1 day, anything? No, I said. Because I didn't leave you with a mess. You made it yourself. That night, I got a text from Elena at Rivertide. You're good? You've been quiet. Oakbridge called, I replied. Offered me the world. And? I let the world keep spinning without me. She didn't ask anything else. She didn't need to, because she got it. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't some grand moment of, look who's begging now. I didn't need that. What I needed was already mine. Peace, autonomy, and a team that believed in doing things right the first time. I wasn't the person on the floor anymore, being asked to justify her worth to people who didn't understand. Her value. I was standing at the helm of something new, something solid. And they were standing in the rubble of shortcuts. 2 months later, I found myself standing in the lobby of a building I never thought I'd return to. Oakbridge, Living's corporate headquarters. Only now, the sign above the reception desk read, Rivertide Integrated Housing. The acquisition went through at a fraction of Oakbridge's former valuation. It wasn't even a negotiation. They were bleeding clients, hemorrhaging talent, and barely holding on to what was left of their infrastructure. Rivertide stepped in like a surgeon in a disaster zone, scalpel in one hand, offer letter in the other. And me? I wasn't coming back as some ghost of the past. I was leading the future. Chief. Integration officer. My job was to salvage what could be saved, merge what mattered, and build something better than both companies had ever managed alone. As I walked the hallways, familiar faces blinked up from cubicles. Some nodded with hesitant relief. A few looked away, ashamed, but most just looked tired. And I didn't blame them. The conference room was packed for the official transition announcement. Elena stood at the front introducing the leadership team. Then she turned toward me with a smile. You all know Clarissa Morgan. She built the foundation of everything we're now combining. And she's here to guide this integration, not just of systems, but of values. I stepped up. The room went quiet. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I'm not here to gloat, I began. And I'm not here to resurrect the past. I'm here to make sure we don't repeat it. I let that sit for a second before continuing. There's a cost to ignoring the people who quietly hold things together. There's a cost to cutting corners and calling it progress. And if there's one thing we take from this merger, let it be this. Respect isn't something you discover when someone leaves. It's something you show while they're still building for you. Silence. Then a single clap. Then more. I didn't smile for show. I just nodded and stepped down. The rest of the day was a blur of orientation, legacy handovers, and scheduling. Workshops. I assigned engineers, not by rank, but by compatibility. I built cross-functional teams. I reinstated old protocols that had once protected the very systems Oakbridge broke. And at every turn, I made sure no knowledge lived in a single head again. That evening, as I left the building, I passed by the server room, the heart of everything I'd once designed. I paused. Through the glass, I saw blinking lights, worn cables, legacy hardware still gasping to stay online. Elena came up behind me. "Want to go in?" I shook my head. "No need," I said. "We'll be moving it all to new infrastructure anyway." She nodded, and we walked out together. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving a system, I was leading one. 1 year later, I stood in front of a different room. No board members, no crisis, no takeover on the horizon. Just a circle of wide-eyed junior engineers and interns, notebooks open, eager. The Rivertide Systems Academy was no longer just an idea. It had been unanimously approved by the board, fully funded, and placed under my direction. I didn't want a promotion. I didn't ask for a title boost or stock options. What I asked for was this: a place to teach. Not just syntax or languages, but how to build things that last. How to document what you make. How to treat your work like it matters. Because someday, someone's entire business, their payroll, their trust, might depend on it. I wrote the curriculum myself. Day 1 wasn't how to write a class. It was how not to disappear from your own system. In one corner sat Alan, my former Oakbridge colleague, now a lead instructor. In another, a woman who once cold-shouldered me during my exit. Now she was here to learn, and I welcomed her, because this wasn't about payback. It never was. It was about creating something better, something they wouldn't have to rebuild from ashes a decade from now. As I ended the first session, I said simply, "We don't code to impress. We build to endure." If this story meant something to you, if you've ever been underestimated, discarded, or forced to prove your worth the hard way, drop a like, share your thoughts, and hit subscribe. Because somewhere out there, someone like you needs to know. You're not forgotten. You're just getting started, and value always finds its voice, eventually.